wooded area with lots of potential. So we're just keeping all avenues open and ensuring we're covering off the entire area with a very structured search.
On May 2nd, 2025, Lily and Jack Sullivan vanished from their home in rural Nova Scotia. In the weeks that followed, investigators gathered interviews, reviewed surveillance, and searched every possible lead. But buried in the documents and echoed in testimony is a phrase that has caught the public's attention. He's really scared. These weren't words from an online rumor. They came directly from someone connected to the case. A statement that, while brief, revealed a deeper layer of tension surrounding this investigation. What was he scared of? Why did those words matter so much? And how do they fit into the mystery of two children who have yet to be found? Tonight, we break down the timeline, the investigation, and the unanswered questions in the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. Because every view, every comment, every subscriber is a stand against silence and a step toward justice. We've just crossed 5,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 6,000, then 7,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button, and definitely where you're watching from, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that stands and fights for justice together. Two young children, a quiet morning in rural Nova Scotia, and then silence. Since May 2nd, 2025, the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan has gripped not just their community, but the entire country. Their absence has left neighbors searching, investigators working tirelessly, and a nation asking the same question: how could this happen? The details remain limited, but what has emerged is a story marked by unanswered questions, growing public frustration, and a family carrying unimaginable pressure. And recently, one statement has drawn even more attention. In testimony connected to the case, someone close to the situation revealed three simple words: he's really scared. It's a phrase that echoes with emotion, suggesting fear, uncertainty, and the weight of something left unsaid. But what do those words really mean? And why have they sparked renewed interest in a case that already feels so heavy with mystery? Tonight, we revisit the timeline, the investigation, and the voices that continue to push for answers in the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. Lily Sullivan was just 6 years old, her younger brother Jack only 4. On the morning of May 2nd, 2025, they were last seen at their family's home in rural Pictou County, Nova Scotia. It was an ordinary spring morning, quiet and calm until everything changed, between 8 a.m. and 9:40 a.m. The children were accounted for at home, but by 10:01 a.m. their absence was reported to authorities. In less than half an hour, a normal day had become the beginning of a mystery that continues months later. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Police and emergency crews were joined by neighbors, volunteers, and entire search teams. Drones scanned the fields and wooded areas, helicopters swept across the skies, Kun-9 units searched the ground, and on foot, hundreds of volunteers combed through terrain, hoping to find even the smallest clue. It was one of the largest search efforts this region had ever seen. For many in the community, it was unthinkable that two children could simply vanish so quickly, so quietly, and without leaving a trace. The sense of urgency was matched only by the determination of those who refused to give up the search. In the hours after Lily and Jack were reported missing, the people of Pictou County rallied together. Neighbors opened their doors, offered food and shelter to search teams, and walked shoulder to shoulder through fields, forests, and country roads. It wasn't just about looking for two children, it was about standing together as a community determined not to let fear take hold. The atmosphere was heavy with emotion. Fear that something unexplainable had happened. Hope that answers would come quickly, and confusion at how, in a place so familiar and close-knit, two children could simply be gone. Fundraisers began almost immediately. Families donated time, money, and supplies. Local businesses provided food for volunteers, and soon the government of Nova Scotia announced a reward of 150,000 Canadian dollars for information that could help bring clarity to the case. For a region where everyone knows one another, the idea that two young children could simply vanish shook the very sense of security. And yet, despite the fear, the community continued to search, driven by hope and by the belief that someone, somewhere knew something that could help. As the community searched, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police focused on building a detailed investigation. Officers conducted more than 50 interviews with family members, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen or heard something on the morning of May 2nd. Polygraph tests were used as part of the process, not to decide guilt or innocence, but to help measure consistency in statements and guide further questioning. Investigators also collected hundreds of hours of surveillance video from nearby roads, businesses, and private homes. Each clip was studied for anything unusual that could point to a lead. At the same time, the public played a major role. Nearly 500 tips were submitted to law enforcement, ranging from possible sightings to information about vehicles in the area. Every tip was logged, reviewed, and either pursued or cleared as part of the broader timeline. But then came a turning point. On July 16th, the RCMP announced that they no longer considered the disappearance of Lily and Jack to be criminal in nature. To many, this announcement was confusing. How could a case involving two missing children not be considered criminal? Authorities explained that, up to that point, no evidence supported the idea of foul play. Still, the public struggled with the uncertainty, left to balance hope for answers with the frustration of silence. In August, newly released court documents provided the public with a closer look at how investigators had been approaching the Sullivan case. The documents outlined portions of interviews, the use of polygraph testing, and the collection of evidence. While private testimony was not shared in detail, the release offered an important glimpse into the scope of the work being done behind the scenes. It showed how investigators reviewed timelines, cross-checked statements, and compared results from different sources of information. Surveillance footage, digital records, and witness accounts were all carefully studied, piece by piece, to test for consistency. The documents did not provide final answers, but they revealed the sheer depth of the investigation and reminded the public of how carefully each statement is weighed. As weeks turned into months, the absence of clear answers became harder to bear. Among those most vocal was the children's grandmother, who publicly called for a formal inquiry into the case. Her request was not an accusation. It was a plea for more oversight, for more transparency, and for assurance that no detail was overlooked. For many in the community, her words echoed their own feelings. The investigation had been massive, but the silence that followed left people unsettled. A case that began with helicopters in the air and hundreds of volunteers on the ground now seemed quieter, and the request for an inquiry struck a chord with those who feared the momentum was fading. It was a reminder that while official updates had slowed, the demand for answers had not. Families, neighbors, and everyday people across Nova Scotia continued to follow every development, unwilling to let the story of Lily and Jack Sullivan fade into the background. As the investigation continued, public discussion only grew louder. Online forums, social media platforms, and even community bulletin boards became gathering places where people shared observations, hopes, and concerns about the Sullivan case. In these spaces, every detail was analyzed. Some conversations focused on reported sounds of a vehicle moving through the area on the night before the children were reported missing. Others raised questions about whether child protection services had ever been connected to the family. And still others looked closely at the timeline of events, comparing official statements to what neighbors remembered seeing or hearing. But with that attention also came a challenge. The line between careful observation and speculation can blur quickly online. While many people simply wanted to help by keeping the case in the public eye, it is important to remember that official updates from investigators remain the most reliable source of information. What the discussions did show, however, was the depth of concern. People far beyond Nova Scotia felt connected to the story. Some saw it as a reminder of how fragile daily life can be. Others saw it as a call to strengthen community awareness and support for families in difficult situations. In many ways, the online commentary became a second search, one carried out not with boots on the ground, but with questions, reflections, and the determination to make sure Lily and Jack's names were not forgotten. It showed the power of awareness and how digital communities can keep attention alive, even when official updates grow less frequent. In recent weeks, one phrase has echoed across headlines and court records. "He's really scared." Though short, these words have carried weight. Their context has been debated, but the emotion they reveal is undeniable. They suggest tension, uncertainty, and the kind of fear that has quietly surrounded this case from the very beginning. Some believe the statement reflects the feelings of someone within the family. Others see it as a glimpse into the emotional atmosphere of those connected to the investigation. Regardless of interpretation, the words have become a symbol, reminding the public of how personal, human, and fragile this story truly is. "He's really scared" is not a conclusion, it is not an answer, But it captures something that resonates far beyond Pictou County. The sense that behind the silence, there are voices holding on to worry, memory, and questions yet to be resolved. Whether it reflects the feelings of a family member, a community voice, or someone close to the investigation, the phrase captures the heart of this story, the unknown. And in that unknown, the search for truth continues. Today, months after May 2nd, the case of Lily and Jack Sullivan remains unresolved. There has been no final conclusion, and no official explanation has yet been given for what happened on that quiet morning in Pictou County. What we do know is this: the investigation is still open. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police continue to review every available lead, from surveillance footage and public tips to earlier testimony and digital records. The reward, 150,000 Canadian dollars, remains active, offered by the Government of Nova Scotia to anyone who can provide information that leads to answers. It stands as both an incentive and a reminder that even the smallest detail could change the course of this case. For now, Lily and Jack's faces remain on posters, in news reports, and in the minds of those who will not stop searching. The hope is that time does not erase their story, and that continued awareness will one day lead to clarity. The disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan reminds us of how fragile answers can be. Months have passed, yet the call for truth only grows louder. What happened on that May morning remains the central question, and until that question is answered, the search continues. If you want to continue following developments in this case, and others like it, we invite you to subscribe to Detective Max, share your thoughts respectfully in the comments, and join us in keeping these stories alive. Awareness matters, and together we can make sure no case is forgotten. You're watching Detective Max, a channel dedicated to examining real cases with care, detail, and respect. Here we focus on facts, timelines, and unanswered questions, bringing you clear breakdowns of ongoing investigations and past mysteries. If you find value in staying informed and raising awareness, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the community. Together we can keep important stories in the spotlight, because every detail matters.